Vaheguru, Satnam. Sorry we have been delayed today, but we will continue nevertheless. Reading of the book, Seeking Success and Happiness. Today we are on chapter 11. The chapter is The Best of Both Worlds. It's an interesting chapter from a personal identity point of view. You see, because we are now a global village, boundaries have been, they are not as identifiable as they used to be. The basic differences we know are the trends in the West and in the East, and in between that, there's always this problem of finding your own identity. Well, because of the interaction between the East and the West. So this chapter is about that, and I guess I'm one of those who has found a greater meaning in my traditions, in my roots. I made an effort to find out more about my roots, and they appeal to me. I did not want to move away from those roots, and there were certain incidences in my life where the opportunity was there, the enticement was there to move away from my roots and my life philosophy. But after putting in a lot of thought, I decided that this was my identity and this is the way I wanted to live. So that's what this chapter is about. So in that sense, perhaps you'll find something in it as well. My life has been one where I have perhaps been able to utilize the values of both worlds, the East and the West. Generally, the philosophy, spiritual emancipation, and family values of the East, mainly through the life philosophy I adhere to, Sikhi, and perhaps the societal freedom of the West. There is, of course, a fair amount of generalization here, but let us delve a little deeper. The biases are my own as I see them, but hopefully moving towards a happier and successful way of life, utilizing the strengths of both worlds. These generalizations of Western and Eastern attitudes are now more blurred as the world rapidly becomes a global village. In fact, more and more Westerners like to emulate Eastern ways by borrowing life philosophies from the East, whereas Easterners are perhaps more conscious of Western ways like the pursuit of materialistic comfort, capitalism, liberalism, and trends. I might not offer an opinion of my own in all instances, but I'm certain my biases will certainly come through. We all have biases, and we should recognize them. Status consciousness leads to the need to live in huge houses and have plenty of gas guzzlers in the driveway. This is a Western norm, now aped by Easterners as well. In fact, I know Easterner friends who outdo Westerners in this particular instance. I have Eastern friends who have huge houses where, to reach each family member, they need intercom systems, or these days, the mobile phones. The East has taught me to live a simple life. Simple living, even in poverty, leads to humility, which leads to contentedness and finding happiness, whereas the West has taught me to strive for more, because more means a higher status in life, with the presumption that it brings happiness. Poverty in the West is considered a stigma. Humility in the East is considered a requisite for a happy life. My faith lists ego as one of the prime vices, whereas Western thought appears to encourage it or at best ignores that. There's a clear distinction between asserting one's rights and nurturing an inflated ego in general Eastern thought. But that is not so in the West, where egoistic behavior is frequently seen as a sign of strength, success, and status. In the West, it is not uncommon to assert fiercely and loudly one's opinions and rights. In the East, such behavior is generally frowned upon as indicators of a less developed spirituality. In Western thought, there appears to be a psychological aversion to humility. Perhaps the English word humility is uncomfortably close to the word humiliation. Most Eastern leaders, commentators, media personalities, and even church leaders all seem to exude an air of arrogance. Now compare them with, say, the Dalai Lama. One bows to greet him and shake his hand, and he bends down even lower. Yet, don't get me wrong, Christian thought, if one considers Christian thought as Western thought, does encourage humility. Proverbs 11:2 of the Old Testament, for example, states, "When pride comes, there comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." In fact, all world religions do encourage humility. Absence of humility is a hindrance from being able to get in touch with the source, because Naam-centered meditation requires a willingness to lower oneself in humility to receive from the divine. Naam in Sikh thought is meditation, which keeps remembrance of Vaheguru, God, as its central focus. A quote from the Guru Granth Sahib, page 560. "Haume nave naal virodh hai, doye na vasai ek thai." Haume nave naal virodh hai, doye na vasai ek thai. Ego is opposed to Naam Simran, Vaheguru. The two cannot dwell in one place. The Guru says that Haume, ego, is a filth which clings to a person and is a polluting presence that torments its victim while resisting all attempts to wash it away. As a result, it will not let its victim turn to God because they are at variance with each other. The best way to bring Haume, ego, under control and attain humility is by engaging in grateful meditation upon the name of Vaheguru, especially being in gratitude of everything one is blessed with. Love life, enjoy it, and be happy in it. Even though striving for wealth is not frowned upon, simple living is a virtue. In simple living, there is no place for ego. The West teaches me to want more, to conquer, to acquire, to strive harder. The West pushes us to be assertive, to be active to the point of being selfish. Self-assertiveness is considered the key to success and happiness in the West, whereas in the East, one is urged to seek contentedness, passive living, going with the flow, and utilizing contemplation and meditation as a key to happiness. Eastern philosophy generally asks us to accept the world as it is. It encourages living in timelessness and being at ease. The West urges us to change it for the better, to live in time and space, to blaze one's own trail, and always being active. It is all about time management, which no doubt is important if one treads the path to materialistic success, but to what extent? Often one hears the phrase, "time is money." One needs to find the balance. There are things wrong on this planet, like the ecosystem being destroyed by human greed, wastage, and overpopulation. So we cannot just accept the world as it is because we are responsible for its deterioration. We must learn to use less and want less. The absence of these Eastern virtues and Western excesses have brought us to the brink of disaster. Hence, we need to become proactive to remedy the wrongs that we have committed in the past for the sake of future generations. My upbringing and formative years was a fine balance of Eastern spirituality, moral and civic environment from my parents, and a Western education to arm me for my vocational and materialistic needs. My dharma, is about doing the right thing by those around me and in my care. The West taught me to look for proof, scientific proof, nurturing the intellect. Whereas the East taught me faith, believing, and feeling, nurturing the mana. The East taught me to listen often and talk less, whereas the West tells me to be more assertive and opinionated. I remember my father telling me, "You have one mouth, but 2 ears. Use them in that proportion. Listen at least twice as much as you are speaking." Sikh philosophy urges us to do greater community service, seva, and to be of service to those around us in need, whereas the West depends on charitable organizations and professional services for those in need. The individual must do what she can because it is the right thing to do, and I believe it is a prerequisite for happiness. Seva also brings about humility, a trait not considered overly necessary or even a requisite for happiness in the West. Helping others generally brings a great deal of fulfillment and happiness. Subsection: giving versus receiving. Eastern living perhaps places more value on giving, whereas Western modern thinking is about receiving or acquisition. In the East, we believe that the best gift is one that is given. In the West, giving, but more prominently expecting gifts on every major occasions like birthdays, holy days, Christmas, Easter, etc., special days, is an endearing tradition. Hence, children grow up concerned more with receiving gifts rather than understanding the significance of the auspicious day and about giving. I do cultural awareness and cultural sensitivities workshops in schools in my home state of Victoria. The most frequent answer I receive from the Christian-based younger children in schools to the question, "What is the significance of Christmas?" The answer normally is receiving presents. In India in general, if anyone, especially a sadhu, holy man, turns up on your doorstep, then however little you have, you must give him something to eat. Giving, Vandashakna we call it, is a virtue. It is one of the cardinal principles of general Indian life philosophy and a mainstay of Sikhi. This is in conjunction with being of service to your fellow human beings. No doubt this leads to exploitation and also encourages begging. So much so that begging and dropping out of society, especially for spiritual reasons, excuses, in India is considered a noble pursuit. I know I am meandering off the subject of giving, but I need to tell a story of exploitation of giving in India leading to religious begging. My brothers and I were on holiday in Punjab, India, when a group of these holy men, sadhus, came knocking on the door for food. My brother told them to come in and started handing them some axes and a saw, pointing to a pile of wood which he told them needed cutting to log fire size. That if they cut them as required, then they would get a full home-cooked meal and the satisfaction of feeling that they have earned their meal. No, they ridiculed my brother and even cursed him as they haughtily departed, knowing full well that the next house would not turn them down for fear of their curses. we, being brought up in the West, we found it all rather amusing. Manne Nanak Pavena Pek. Guru Granth Sahib, page 3 in Japji Sahib. Manne Nanak Pavena Pek. The faithful, O Nanak, do not wander around begging. Next subsection, old age. Old age in the East is welcomed. One's status moves higher in life as one gets older. Generally, greater respect is given to the elderly, and they are a source of wisdom, advice, and guidance for the younger generations. Old folks are reverently looked after by the offsprings and included in all occasions. Passage into old age can be very happy, enjoyable, and even exciting. Advice in Eastern philosophy is to treat old folks with reverence, perhaps because one day everyone grows old and wishes to be well treated and to be of use till one passes on. Guru Granth Sahib, page 1200. Kahe poot chagrat ho sang baap, jinke jeene bedire tum, how tin syo chagrat paap. O son, why do you pick arguments with your father? It is sinful to argue with your father who raised you. Bhai Gurdas, verse 13, chapter 37 of Bhai Gurdas Niyawara. Ma pyo parhar karai, pooj devi dev na sev kamani. Worshipping so-called gods and goddesses is useless if one gives up or shuns one's parents. In the West, old age is dreaded. Old folks are considered old-fashioned and out of touch with current trends and beliefs. Old folks start feeling redundant and useless and generally spend their last days in aged care communities with their offsprings visiting them once or twice a year. The West has now devised days like Father's Day and Mother's Day, firstly promoting greater consumerism, buying more presents, and secondly to add one more day where offsprings might visit their parents. Otherwise, parents are visited at Thanksgiving, Christmas Day, Easter, or perhaps on their birthdays. Westerners who are astute, knowing what is ahead, prepare themselves with a good retirement nest egg, ready to enjoy the fruits of a life of labor and wealth accumulation, ending perhaps in a self-funded old folks' home. Even their burials and cremations are prepaid by them so that the least burden or dependency is placed on their offsprings, nor expected from them. Next subsection, living with parents. In the East, living with parents or parents living with their children is the norm. This would be obvious from what I have already stated above. In the West, living with parents is frowned upon. I need my space is a catchphrase in the West. The relationship with parents one day becomes a friendship if one still gets on with one's parents. Some Western parents even get called and like being called by their first names by their offsprings. Not so in the East, where parents are respected and accorded a higher status by the offsprings and the younger generations generally. I remember an amusing, to me anyway, episode on the American Oprah Winfrey show. Oprah was interviewing two of the most sought-after movie stars of India, Bollywood it's called these days, the married couple Abhishek Bachchan and Aishwarya Rai. Both, even though superstars in their own rights, live with their parents of Abhishek, Amitabh Bachchan, a living screen legend himself, and his wife Jaya, also an actress. The dialogue went something like this. Asked Oprah, "You're both superstars, presumably very rich, yet you live with your parents. How so?" To which Abhishek answered, "You, Oprah, are a movie and small screen legend in your life and a very successful television personality. Yet you appear deprived of living with your parents. How so?" The subject The subject came to an abrupt end in laughter. In the East, it is the norm to live with parents for, in my mind, obvious reasons. One being that a family environment is the most sought after way to live and the most desirable atmosphere to raise children. One does not live with parents either because parents have passed away or there is a total breakdown in their relationship. In the West, it is entirely the other way around. To be able to live away from one's parents is a sign that one can stand on one's 2 feet, and living with parents is tantamount of being considered a parasite. Grandparents are the most stabilizing factor in the lives of children, and even for occasional babysitting duties. Perhaps here I should have said grandchildren rather than children. As parents, they are there for consultation and advice. It is interesting though, in the West, babysitting fees is skyrocketing and old folks' retirement homes are not cheap either. Perhaps the trend will change and children and grandparents will come back under the same roof, forced by economic constraints. Next subsection on marriage. The East teaches us to marry first, with parents' approval and consent. In fact, even allowing parents to choose our life partners, then later to fall in love. Ideally, marriage becomes the beginning of a lifelong love affair. The West teaches us to find our own partner of any background, even if parents do not approve, based on what is perceived as love or even just physical attraction. Marriage is the happy outcome, or sometimes, unfortunately, the end of a beautiful romance. The West treats marriage more like a contract where even prenuptial agreements are now in vogue. In the East, it is in the main a dissoluble, lifelong bond. A greater awareness of what is right and what is not is entirely up to the individual. Certain aspects might seem easy options, but not necessarily harbingers for future happiness. Tailor your life and make changes in such a manner that assures you long-lasting happiness. There are always options, especially in the West. One needs to weigh the pros and cons, especially for the longer term, so that the pursuit of happiness becomes an ongoing affair rather than a short-term one. In a shrinking world with greater technological advancements, we need to nurture the human factor. We have reached a state where we communicate through technology rather than conversation. We need to find time to talk, to love, to hug each other, to value each other, to see each other more often. We need to take the foot off the accelerator of materialistic pursuits and spend time together as families, as friends, and as a race, which needs the human touch. We should not get entangled in materialism, which does bring instant gratification, but ultimately does not bring real, long-lasting happiness. If you strive for happiness, then one needs to want less, love more. Consider phrases like time is money as irrelevant or at least of secondary importance, and invest more of your time in family and human relationships. Use technology and wealth as masters and not become slaves to them. The pursuit of happiness is within our grasp, even though we sometimes convince ourselves that it is not. One should always be looking for ways and means to reduce one's expenditure, even to the extent that we should not worry about our status in society, amongst friends, and even amongst family, if one wishes to gain happiness. Do not measure your happiness by what your neighbors, your relatives, and even your friends think. I go back to my own life. In the eyes of those around me, my status dropped drastically when I dropped out from being an accountant and a manager to a lowly musician, minstrel. I pursued my dream to the best of my ability. I lost friends and almost my family. I faced ridicule from close ones and so called friends. It took me a long time to settle into my newfound life. Then came a time when I realized that status and prestige was not important. My happiness was paramount. Today, I am not only happy, but also know who my true friends are. And through my life, my daughters too are grateful for the freewheeling life they have had so far, and also appear to understand what happiness is. And they pursue happiness in their own way without worrying about what other people think. I think I'm through, isn't it? Right, Jamil? You are in a position to make the best of both worlds. Long-lasting happiness is possible if one is astute enough to take the best of both East and West and navigate clear of the pitfalls. Always work on long-term happiness, which sometimes necessitates sacrifices in the short term. We have made a fair amount of sacrifices, haven't we? Vaheguru. Do not worry overly about what other people think, and do not worry about being ridiculed. Today, one is not stuck or imprisoned in a particular society or community as one used to be before. Even relocation can be easily done these days, and one can choose one's company. The old ways are breaking down. Demands and restrictions of community or society rarely exist these days. One can live in complete isolation or choose one's friends, company and friends. The onus therefore falls on the individual to search for one's own progress and happiness. In some ways, therefore, it is today more difficult to do so. Especially in the West, we do not have society or community to guide us and also obstruct us if we appear to be heading in the wrong direction. We do not allow parents to guide us and also check us. In fact, we generally consider the older generation out of touch, old-fashioned and backward. And in desperation, some old folks try to keep up, wearing in-fashion clothes, making all attempts to look young, and insisting that the younger generation calls them by their first names. Being old is a stigma and very, very lonely. The onus today is entirely on the individual for his or her progress in life and through happiness. The choices of lifestyle are much, much more. With the removal of restrictions and greater freedom comes greater responsibility by the individual. The best ideal is to be able to mix the old with the new in the pursuit of long-term happiness. One need not follow the trends blindly, as most do. Pick and choose. Genuine happiness is there for the asking and taking. We have choices which were not there in older times, but we need to choose wisely and responsibly, keeping the long term always in mind. That is the chapter 11 on the West and the East. We are very fortunate in the time that we are in. We have the ability to be able to choose our own lifestyle. But in the process, we sometimes have the tendency of losing touch with our inner self, our spirituality, which is something which is not taught in schools, and which every parent needs to make a conscious effort to teach these values and teach spirituality to our own younger generations and generations to come. So thank you very much for joining me for chapter 11. Once again, we are starting a Dya Singh YouTube channel, which is already, I think Jamil would have already put it on online. We have to have 1,000 subscribers, and subscribe in YouTube parlance simply means hits. It does not It is not any kind of commitment, nor any monetary payment required, but that's the word that they use, subscribe. So please go to the channel, listen to all the various items we have already put on. Satguru ki seva, service unto the Guru, is just been put on. And the other one there, which is a very good favorite of mine, is Main Jaan Jan Tarbe Na Jano, which has got one of our Western artists and also my sound recorder, Darren Mullen, singing on it as well. Main Jaan Jan Tarbe Na Jano. And we did a Shabad for the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak, which was Dhan Guru Nanak, Guru Nanak ki Vadiyai. That the recording of that and also the music was done by another very good friend of mine, Quentin S. So we're going to develop this sort of renditions for those who are young at heart, for Sikh youth in the diaspora, and for anyone who just loves good music. So once again, I'd like to thank SikhNet for giving me this opportunity of reading through my book. The book is available on Amazon.com. I'll never get that word right, would I? And also, if you want the cheaper version, write to contact at Dya Singh. It's being sold directly through our website, and we can always post it out to you. The advantage of that is I can even sign on it for you before I send it out to you. That's a personal service that we carry out.
Jesse Bart has just written, yes, happiness is utmost importance.
Happiness must be a platform. Happiness, you should not, the one thing I discovered after writing these books over 20 years was, don't go out looking for happiness. Happiness is already there. You just have to encourage it to come out. And the first thing you do, like Chatwan says, get up every morning and say, I am happy. Thank you very much. Jasbir Bhat, is it? Jesse Bart. Thank you very much for the comment. Any other comments you have to make, you wish to make, please do them. I'm very lucky. I get a lot of Vahegrus and Satanams and hearts pumping coming out, which is and thumbs up, which is wonderful. But feel free to send comments in, and if there are any questions, I will make the best effort I can to answer them as well. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Satnam. Vaheguru. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.